Hey, good evening, AWC Nation. Listen, we are so excited that you decided to tune in with us tonight. You are now tuning in live to UNBOX AWC. Long story short, this is another segment at our church where we take what was talked about on Sunday and we break it down into smaller, bite-sized pieces. Some of the questions that people are asking, and sometimes we're going to do what we're going to do tonight, which is to do part two. And so I'm going to do a little bit of teaching tonight. But before we start right now, make sure that you're sharing the post, that you're sharing the link. Specifically share it on your page with the people that you love, a text message personalized. Also, if this ministry is doing what we hope it's doing, which is feeding you and it's bringing joy and bringing life to where you are, like we really encourage you to give to our ministry. We have these two things called we have these things called culture codes, and one of them is generosity, which means that if we can, we will. And the other is faith, which means that when we give, God literally gives us a spiritual yes. So anyway, we're so glad that you're that you're in with us tonight. I got my parents here with me. I'm going to be talking and unboxing a little bit more from Sunday, but I have them here for spiritual reference and also because they are the expertise when it comes to this parenting thing, and they are the leaders of our house. So if you're ready, right there in the chat, somebody type "I'm ready." Let's go. Let's do it. I'm watching you. We're here. We're doing this thing together. So Sunday, I had the opportunity to teach this message called "We Didn't Ask to Be Here." And the objective of that message was really breaking down how Adam and Eve's decision before they had children, when they were in Eden, when they were kicked out of Eden, how those decisions ended up having a massive effect on the way in which their relationship worked between them as husband and wife, but then also the relationship that they had with their children after they had them. That's Cain and Abel. So I just want to go through a little bit of the scripture just to give us some context before I get into the final parts of my sermon that I didn't finish on Sunday. So we're going to go from Genesis 4, 1 through 12. Now remember, up until this point, Adam and Eve were in Eden. They fall out of grace with God after eating the fruit. We don't know what it was. It could have been a papaya, an avocado, a tomato. I know that that's up for debate if that's a fruit or not. But after eating this fruit, they fell out of grace with God, and God kicks them out of the garden. He also said that he was going to curse the both of them. He was going to curse the woman's womb, that she would be in a place where she would have to go through pain in order to have children, and that she was going to want to have to, she was going to want to try to rule over her husband. And then he told Adam that you're going to have to work in the ground, but every time that you go to the ground, it's not going to reproduce what you put in it. So in Genesis 4, we see that Adam and Eve have now had children, and they've bore them. So let's jump into the third verse. When it was time for the harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Abel also brought a gift, the best portions of the firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. This made Cain very angry, and he looked dejected. Sunday, I talked about how the word dejected literally means to be depressed and in spirits. Being depressed in your spirit, and also how it's disheartening and you can be low-spirited. So I have a question for my parents in regards to why is it sometimes as children we can experience the same level of hurt and pain that they did? And I'm going to give them some time to think about that question, and I'm going to read the rest of the scripture. So, verse number 6. God comes to Cain and he asks, "Why are you so angry?" The Lord asked Cain. "Why do you look so dejected? You will be accepted if you do what is right." So I guess my question to you first, Pastor Martin, is when God was talking to Cain and he said, "If you do what is right," what did Cain do that was wrong? Because Cain doesn't know, because remember, we talked about it on Sunday. His father never taught him right from wrong, so he just thought that everything that he was doing was in right standing. So what do you think that God was trying to get to Cain?
The bottom line of what God was trying to say to Cain is, if you do what's right, if you honor me by what comes out of the ground, if you make me first, if you give me the first fruit of this, then your ground will always be blessed. So that's something that either Adam taught both of them, or he only taught the firstborn.
Right.
We're not certain. But that's all he was really saying from my study of the word.
Okay, Pastor Leno, do you have something on that? So what you're saying, because for the people that are watching right now, there are some of you that don't know your biological people. There are some of you that were adopted. There were some of you that you if you saw them in the grocery store and somebody said, like, "Hey, that's your dad, that's your mom, that's your grandfather, that's your brother, your sister," you wouldn't know. But it sounds like what you're saying is, even though Adam was even though God told Adam that the ground was going to be cursed, Cain could have still reaped a harvest from that same ground if he would have listened.
If he would have done what his brother did.
So
And given a first fruit. So God is saying, if you just turn around and bring me a first fruit, we're good. But instead of that, he became very angry at his brother over a proper offering.
Because it says, and I think that's really significant, because in verse 3, it says that Abel presented the first and the best, and Cain presented some of his crops. Right. Okay. So when we get to the end of this story, Cain doesn't know what to do with the inside he doesn't know what to do with like the feelings that he has on the inside in his soul, in his spirit, and in family and in relationships with your boss, with your coworker, with your family members, brother, sister, aunt, your wife, your husband. Sometimes in family, you can want to love people, but the stuff on the inside of you is not congruent with what you know you need to do. And I know that happens often where you know that you need to ask for forgiveness, or you know that you need to say sorry, or that you need to reconcile, but everything on the inside of you is fighting what you know needs to happen. So that happens with Cain, and those emotions drive him to kill his brother. So in a lot of our families, there's so many different things that when we look at our lives, like the title of the sermon from Sunday, we're asking this question of, we didn't ask to be here. And I think that question is so important, because when we look at that question of we didn't ask to be here, it means that for most families, we have a goal that we're trying to reach, and sometimes things keep us from getting there. So with you guys counseling and doing this thing for like 25 plus years, 30 years or so, what are some of the cases where you're counseling family members, business owners, where it's kind of like this feeling like, I didn't ask to be here. Like, I didn't ask to deal with this. Like, what are some of those things, and how are people wrestling with those types of situations?
So really, when I heard you say that Sunday, I had this wild thought that went through my head, because you did. Growing up, you would say typically when it was getting real tough, I didn't ask to be here.
Yeah.
But yeah. I didn't ask to be here. So if you remember, I didn't get real upset about that. But I would probably say something like this, and parents, everybody needs to know. You would say, I didn't ask to be here, and I would say exactly, and walk away.
Yeah.
What I meant was, you didn't ask to be here, but I asked for you.
Right.
So if I asked for you and God gave you to me, I'm responsible for teaching you. So the pressure I was putting on you wasn't because you were a problem, or because you were what you did was not right in a sense. It was just that I'm responsible. I prayed for you.
Right.
I named you before your mama was pregnant with
Right.
you.
Right.
I knew what you were going to be. So I'm like, I did ask for you, so I'm responsible for teaching you. I'm responsible for you not getting away with some things you'd like to do. I'm responsible for putting the right pressure on you so that you turn into what I asked for.
Right. Right. So knowing that the people that are watching, because we are so graced to be a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-generational church on purpose, I mean, that's a really wide spectrum. So for the family, the common family, what are some situations that you believe that people are watching where they're like looking at their life and like, we did not ask for this? What are some of the things that, or like with women or mothers or fathers and things like that, of that nature?
When I was thinking about that question, it's kind of I don't really know what to do with a statement like that.
Okay.
Because I think of all of the I didn't ask to be here, because I think about all the unborn children.
Okay.
That did not have a voice or a place and time to even make that statement. So to a parent, and I would say specifically to mothers, that's almost like a dagger in a sense. I can understand it on both sides, or the many sides of the coin, but as you begin to develop it more on Sunday, I got a little bit more lighter about it, but it is something, Joshua, that can feel very, very deep.
Sure.
Inside of the soul,
right,
the womb of a woman.
Is that because of the 9 months?
Yeah, let's not go there. So
growing.
So for a lot of people that are watching, this question, I think, is formed differently. Yes. I think it's, for some of you, you were super rambunctious with some money in this last year, and you made some really aggressive, robust decisions with your finances, and your bread didn't come back to you, and what you were projecting in your investments, now you're like, I didn't ask for this. Some of you might be dealing with an addiction or a sin that like you do not have a desire to keep going to the bottle or to keep using all of your time watching TV or being a procrastinator, and like it's like this vicious cycle of like, why am I here? So when we were looking at the end of Genesis, we get to the point where Cain kills his brother, and God comes to him and he says, hey, where is Abel? And Cain makes a very profound statement, right? So Cain, we're going to go to the 9th verse, right? So this is Genesis 4:9. It says, afterward the Lord asked Cain, where is your brother? Where is Abel? And Cain asks a question. He says, I don't know. And he says, Cain responded, am I my brother's guardian? If we look at this term in the New King James, Cain literally is asking, like, am I my brother's keeper? But on Sunday, I brought up this theory of I think that Cain was really asking, like, if I am his keeper, nobody taught me, like, the specifics of how to take care of another individual, let alone myself. So a lot of times in our families, and in a lot of our family series, we'll talk about like what it takes to be a really great family, what it takes to communicate, what it takes to like build better foundations. But one thing that I think that we really have to like talk about is the fact that the situation that you're in is real. So in church, it's so simple for us to be like, oh, just pray about it and we'll plead the blood. But I think that one of the best things that we can do is just like Cain, take some time and look at the situation and objectively acknowledge the fact that I am not where I would like to be. So tonight, what I would really like to share with you is some of those points from Sunday, but points that I believe that every single family, and I'm coming from a child's perspective, that's why I have my parents here, because I'm hoping that they will chime in and bring like some absolutes to it. But there are some things that I believe in the word that Adam should have taught his son. When I did the illustration on Sunday, there was sin, there's patterns, there's addiction, there's family history, and then there was the box with the question mark on it, meaning like there are things that like our families go through that as parents, you're probably like, I didn't sow for my son to be lost. I didn't sow for us to be struggling financially and things like that. So here we go. I got 8 of them. I want to make sure that we use our time correctly, but I'm going to be asking them, and I'm hoping that we can have some good conversation. So number 1, the mother and the father, right, in this relationship, we have to look at Adam as the head, right? We're going based off of the word of God. Father is the head. The mother is also, as many people would say, the mother is the neck, right? Because the head can't move where the neck doesn't want to go, right? And then out of their union come children. But we have to understand that literally 70% of the people that we're talking to, the capital C church, the church at large, 70% of people do not look like the family in Genesis. It's a mother with 2 children. It's a mother that has had 2 miscarriages, but she still feels her children. It's a son that was adopted or someone that was thrown to the streets or because of some terrible things that happen in your family, like you're living with your grandmother. So what I'm hoping to do with these points is not to condemn. It's not to convict. It's not to make you look at your people at your house, at your apartment, or in the hotel room if you're out of the city, and look at your people and be like, wow, we have a long way to go. But what we're hoping is that through these points that you will get some hope for your family. Is that cool? All right, so here we go. Point number 1, when it comes to building a stronger family, and these are all questions that begin to attack that statement of we didn't ask for this. Number 1 is being able to practice forgiveness and reconciliation. I think so many times in family and even in our family, one of the best things that really showed me how to be a young man or how to deal with issues that I was dealing with personally was having a place where I could practice forgiving and where I could practice being reconciled. So many times from up here or from the stage or when you're reading the word, some things sound really good. And it looks like, the idea of it sounds great. Like, man, this Thanksgiving, we're going to sit down and everybody's going to apologize for what happened in the 2nd grade. And my mom's going to apologize for this. And I'm going to say sorry. And then what happens is like you sit down at the turkey dinner and you're like, yeah, this is a little bit more difficult, right? So for you guys, for us, why, as parents, why do you think that it was so important for you to instill in us as children or in the body of your children that forgiveness and reconciliation, it's not a choice. Like you have to do this in order to be healthy.
I see forgiveness as a gift.
Okay.
You got to make a decision to give it, and it does matter in what attitude and what motive. And if we really begin to think about it, it's a precious gift that from one person to the other,
Yeah.
when you extend it. And the sooner we can begin to instill this in our families, and the only way to instill something in your family, the father and the mother must first practice that behavior, that position.
Yeah.
So we can't instill something that we're not practicing ourselves.
Right.
So I do see forgiveness as a very, very rare and precious gift.
Yeah. And so one thing that we practice in our house, which I think that when other people would come over, it would kind of throw them off. But when my dad would reconcile with me and I would reconcile with them. So like we would be like in the middle of a dinner or somewhere, and there would be not an argument, but there would be like a disagreement or a miscommunication. And he would literally like get on his knees and like look me in the face as like a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old and talk to like my soul and my spirit. So for you, Pastor Martin, when it comes to reconciliation as a father with your children, with your wife, like in the presence of other people, what do you feel? Why do you feel that carries weight, and how important is that for families to do so?
Whether fortunate or unfortunately, and all the fathers, all the men, I'll be meeting with you at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning.
Right.
But fortunately or unfortunately, a child equates God to their father or parent.
Hold on, wait a minute. A child equates God to their father.
They may never see God, but if the child never gets forgiveness from their father,
Yeah.
they will see God as an unforgiving God.
That's really good.
Yeah. So I wanted to practice it in my home. You were wrong, but I forgive you.
Right.
And if anyone gives you a hard time after this, besides your mother and your sister, come back to us, because we're the house of forgiveness. Because I wanted
That's
you,
really good.
I wanted my children that whenever they got in trouble, they could run to God, because he, unlike your father and mother, saw what you did, knew what you did
Right.
before you did it.
That's true.
And if you come, but he can't forgive you until you come to him.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. And so another question that I have is that parents aren't always right too. And I know that it's kind of tough to, I have to assume it's very difficult and it's very weighty and heavy to be a parent. Like once you have the child, it's cute, but like it's heavy. So what would you, because we have to assume that there are some people online, some parents that are carrying some really heavy things where they might have caused an offense with their child, and now it started when they were 2 and now their child's 40 and they're 60 years old. So what does forgiveness and reconciliation look like from the parent to the children? Or from husband to wife, or like from the top down?
In the forgiving process, one of the key things to remember is, in order to need or have a desire to extend forgiveness, is that there was a problem.
Right.
And what, going into it, the key is this: always do your best to separate the problem from the person.
That's really good.
Good.
And so in doing so, I find that we really need to look at the person that we are extending that forgiveness, or we're having that unsure time with, that conflict and all of this.
Right.
Actually open your eyes and look at that person, because it's really difficult to remain angry and upset with a parent, or
Right.
a parent with a child, when you see them as another valuable
Right.
human spirit.
Yeah.
So just
That's good.
remember in the process to keep the problem separated from the person.
Yeah, and I think that that's so key, because Pastor Martin taught a message where he basically talked about when you don't forgive, it's like the person has died and you attach them to your body willfully. And that person, whenever you do with a dead body, they begin to decay. And people will smell the scent of unforgiveness on you. People will sense unreconciliation on you. So if people feel that and they can smell it, how much more does that smell stink in the house? So that's why we really preach this conversation of acknowledging when you're wrong and not making it a feeling, not making it subjective. Subjective basically means it's all like the touchy-feeling thing. Objective is, this is what happened, I was wrong, I apologize, so we can move on with our life. Because when you don't forgive, you literally put a spiritual pause on your development, on your family's growth, and also on your ability to love one another. So here we go. Number 2. The second thing that I have in my notes that's really important for us as families to begin to develop is wrapping each other up. Now, I know that not everybody has physical touch as like their number one love language, but I want to show you something. There's something about having physical touch with somebody that makes you feel like you're loved. Like, watch this. Like when I walk up to my pops and I say, "What's good?" There's something about this that like makes you feel so much better. Or there's something about being able to do this and like kiss your mom. Like there's something about that. So if it feels that good when you can, that means that it has to feel horrible when you can't. Like when you can't walk up to your mom and just hug her, right? Like, and I think that so many times like our hearts are running to get towards one another, but our heads are like, yeah, well, I remember everything that happened. So these are just a couple of tips. These are things that we've practiced. These are things that me and my wife are talking about before we have our children, so that we can set, like the boundaries of like, there are no boundaries. We're going to be hugging and kissing our kids until like they're 70, right? So one of them are high fives, dapping the person up. But the other thing is that when you are in close enough proximity, when you're walking through the house, like literally like bumping into one another or like having a conversation with them. Physical touch, I honestly believe, breaks every single other barrier when it comes to sight, when it comes to what you hear, when it comes to what you see and what you smell. You can say so much more in a touch than you can with your words. If you find it hard to do number 1, if you find it hard to forgive or to reconcile, listen, when your moms, I don't know who you are, if you have your mother in your life or your father in your life or a good friend, sometimes you don't know what to say. Right. And that person wraps you up and everything that you want to say is already being said. Amen. How that can look practically is if somebody in your room is a movie buff, you don't have to necessarily like the movie, but sit with them, share the popcorn. Like physical touch is so important. So here we go. Do you guys have anything to share on that, the physical touch part? Now, I know that's number 1 for her. So for mom, I'm not at the house anymore. So anytime that I'm with her, like she makes me kiss her and she also makes me hug her. And that's my number 1 love language. And it is for her too. And it also fills her cup. So it's just nice to know, right? So here we go. Number 3. Sometimes in family, we can set expectations of one another that aren't reachable. And I think that is what we see in the book. Is that Cain had this expectation. Oh, this is so good. Holy Spirit, help. Cain, I honestly believe, had this expectation of having a father. But I think that expectation wasn't reachable because Adam didn't really know what to do with Cain. Yes. Right? So we have to assume that with some of us in family, when you have a child, when you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or you're dating, or you're in an engagement, or you have a friend, if nobody has taught you how to be a friend, then it's inevitable for you to be friendly. So number 3 is that we have to give each other crushable tasks. Now, what do I mean by that? So many different times, like as family members, my dad would like give me a task to do, and he'd be like, "Man, you're gonna crush it." So as a kid, he was like, "Man," I would go and like cut the grass, and he'd be like, "Man, you put them lines in that grass, man." And like to me, it was a big deal, but for him, he just didn't have to cut the grass. But he never made it. He never
wasn't like that.
You never made me feel like it was a chore. No, I'm kidding. He never made it feel like a chore. Like we used to make things around the house like a game or an achievement. And I think that was so important because when you make the expectations of your family reachable, you'll get happier quicker. But when you set expectations for your family that you know that they can't reach, sometimes I think that we set ourselves up to be angry so that we can justify it, right? So what does that look like to you guys, like in family, when somebody is looking for a reason to be upset, like they literally gain their energy from failed expectations?
The only way to get to the top of the ladder is one rung at a time.
Right, that's good.
So it makes no sense for you to have an expectation that your child, your husband, your sister can get to the top of the ladder every time.
Yeah.
Give them steps, give them a way to get there, and they'll appreciate you, they'll open their heart to you, and they'll listen to your advice. So that's simply how I look at forming my family. Everybody needs a win so that when they get to a challenge, they believe they can win.
That's good.
And they also know that we believe they can win because they have the experience of us as a family putting each other in the position to win.
That's really good. And if there's a track record of us as a family winning together, I'll start to work harder for the celebration with my people rather than the trophy.
That's true.
So if I know that once I do well on this test, or once your child does well here, or once dad comes home and he's actually like doing those things like with the kids, or like he's cleaning or washing the dishes, or whatever your family does, whatever the task is, if you celebrate them enough, doing the task will become unimportant, and they'll be doing tasks just to receive the love, which I think is extremely healthy. Another thing is that for parents, one thing that really helped for me as a child was that my parents' planning started with things that they knew that I could do well.
Yes.
And if there were things that I didn't do well and you knew that I was going to drop the ball, they never left me alone to do the task. And if I did drop the ball, it became a very soft, like, teaching moment, and they didn't chastise me for things that they knew that I didn't do well. So you have a child that you know struggles with certain things. Like, you know it's tough for them to remember to do the dishes. So maybe do the dishes with them, or maybe set expectations that they just do the drying, or they do the drying, you do the washing, or vice versa. So that way they see you actually, like, implementing and pouring into the thing that you've asked them to do. So here we go. Don't want to waste any more time. So number 4, everybody talks about communication. Communication, talking, speaking, being able to hear. But how many of you guys know that there is a vast difference between somebody that is listening to you and somebody that is hearing you? Listening is the passive part of when you're listening to music and you don't even know the words that are coming through and it sounds nice, but you're not paying attention. But hearing is the active part of actually acknowledging when the person is speaking, receiving what they're saying. And in our house, one thing that we would do is that we would actually repeat back to the person what they said to us, just to make sure that they know that, like, I'm here, I'm with you, and I acknowledge. Some of the time that I honestly believe as children, because when you give us instruction, we're listening, but we're not really hearing what you're having to say. So for some of us, you got to slow it down. I know that was that for me, because I would just be like, yeah, I got it. Yeah, I got it. And then I would forget something that was vital. Like when my dad asked me to cut the grass once, he was like, hey, remember, when you go up against the side of the house, make sure that you don't bump up against the side of the house, because what you're going to do is you're going to drop the range from tall grass to the bottom, and you're going to shave the grass. I'm like, yeah, I got it. Yeah, I got it. I was listening, but I wasn't hearing, because I really just wanted to get it done. And then what happened is that you end up shaving, Joshua, half of the grass. But when we do not communicate in our lives, just like I shaved the grass, we can create superior damage in our families. So this is what the point is. The point that I have here is to start open communication. One of our culture codes here at AWC is open. We believe in communication that does 4 things, and I want you to write these down. Number 1, communication that is open, which means that the doors to talking to me about anything and everything is open. When your children, and I'm gonna speak from a child's perspective, when I don't believe that I can talk to my parents about things, I won't, and I will go and try to find information from other people. And when you go and find information from other people, 9 times out of 10, it's not what you need. The second is in open, O and then P. P basically means that it's practical information, right? So when we're talking, we're not using a whole bunch of sarcasm. We're not using a whole bunch of like jokes, but we're trying to get straight to the point of what we're communicating so that we don't waste time and we don't change, and we don't change the atmosphere in the room with our words. E means effective. So effective communication is when mom says something to me or when dad says something to me, I acknowledge what they said, I do what they told me to do, or I go and do whatever they told me to do. And then this is the one point that's so important about effective communication, is that you have to close the loop. I know our staff is watching right now, and I know they hate it. But closing the loop of communication makes it effective. Joshua, go do X, Y, and Z. I say, hey, mom, this is what you asked me to do. This is what I'm fixing to go do. I go and do whatever she asked me to do, and then I come back, and I say, hey, by the way, I finished such and such, and we communicate. When we begin to close the loop in communication, it literally builds trust. And the last part of open, O-P-E-N, is conversation that is neutral. Now, I want to talk to my people about this because we've taken a test, a couple of like those like profiles for like personalities. And when we communicate, all of us are looking for something different in communication. So Callie, when she's communicating, her number one, her life question is your life together? My question is, do you care? Pastor Martin's question is, are we together? He doesn't care if we're fighting, cussing, if there's blood on the walls. If we're all together, he's a happy man. And mom's question is like, have we produced anything? Are you doing your part? Like, are you carrying your weight? So for families that have people that communicate at different levels, what would be some tips and advice that you give for them to communicate so that everybody can kind of like take off their guard and actually talk to one another? Or how do we do it?
She looks at me as if to say, I'm going to talk about this.
Right, yeah.
Simply put, to communicate, as my husband said in my ear, to talk, to be understood.
Yeah.
And, you know, in our family, we have to make sure, because now you have produced 3 strong talkers. And so our challenge is most of the time making sure that the person that is speaking is also being understood.
Right.
So we have to make sure that we're not interrupting. And I am notorious, I would say, in my family for being labeled as, when you finish,
interrupter.
the interrupter. And you know, and most of the time it's like, I don't understand. I'm listening, but I'm not understanding, or I'm not perceiving what the person, they're doing a lot of talking, but I'm not understanding. So I either say, give me more, tell me a little more, because I'm not tracking with you. But the point of communicating is when a person is talking, they're talking in hopes that they would be understood.
Yes.
And heard, yes.
Yeah.
To be heard.
Right.
And then to be understood.
And to be understood.
Yes,
1,000%.
absolutely.
And I think that's so key, because a lot of us in our families are tiptoeing around conversations, like in the illustration regarding family history. There are so many different conversations, and maybe Pastor Martin can talk about it. But there are conversations that Pastor Martin had with me as a son, but he talked, when I was 12, he talked to me as Martin at 12. Like open communication, like, hey, these are the things that I dealt with and that I beat. It's going to be your turn, and this is how you effectively do that. So for a father, how does a father openly communicate? And let's just be specific, because there's a dad or there's a father that wants to have children who had a terrible experience. It's like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, what type of advice would you give for a father to communicate effectively with their children or with anyone?
Just really understand that every man who has a house, a wife, and or kids, you need a safe place too.
Yeah.
You need a place where you can talk. And it's really important for you to make that place you can talk your home. Your wife, your kids, your grandma, it doesn't matter what house you're in. You want to make that a safe place where you can talk. So what do? You let others talk. You let others in the house talk to you, and when it's your turn, be honest.
Yeah.
Be open with your children. When you failed, talk to them about the failure.
Yep.
So that they can understand what opportunities to fail they may be offered and how not to take those offers. So just because you're the dad doesn't mean you get to lie.
Yeah.
That's good.
Just because you're the mom doesn't mean you get to hide. Mm-hmm. You can't hide from your children. You've got to be, if you want them to be exposed and naked, if Adam is naked, Eve should be naked.
That's good. That's really
good. If
good.
Adam and Eve are naked, the children should be naked.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Go
Josh,
ahead.
can I add, it is so important when Pastor was saying, don't allow the mom to hide, not to let any family member hide. You got to pay attention when you're in the discussion to make sure that everybody that's in the room, that they have an opportunity to speak. Mm-hmm. And you have to be creative to not allow them to just sit there silently.
Right.
And I would also say that you don't get any outs. You shouldn't do that. That's not healthy for the family.
Right.
And then for those of you that think you're 21 and that you, by the standards and the laws of the American society, listen, be very careful playing that card with your parents. You need to share your lives. As I think Callie said so profoundly, we need to give you an opportunity to talk, to actually spill the beans. Tell us what's going on in your heart so we can help. We are not the enemy.
Yeah.
We want to be intimately involved in helping you communicate so you help us be better parents.
Right. And when it comes to having those tough and those hard conversations, sometimes you need somebody that's going to be the mediator, and you got to set up some ground rules before you start talking about it, meaning that you do not get to feel this way. You do not get to interrupt. You don't get to yell. You don't get to do those things. And then instead of attacking the person for the things that they're still working on, draw them back to the board of the things that you guys set up. Ready? Okay, so here we go. Number 5. The next is don't do it alone. So communication is important, but community is just as important. When we look at the Word of God, God didn't even create man without agreement and with community. It says, let us make man, which means the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the 3 parts of God, the Trinity, they had to agree to come together. And one of the best things about being in family is when you don't have to do Christmas alone, when you don't have to do Thanksgiving alone, when you don't have to go to your own son or daughter's basketball or football games alone. Like right now in COVID, it's really not the best situation, but it's really awesome to know that your family has another family. Like whenever you see the Johnson family, you see the Williams, or whenever you see the Baker family, you see the Johnsons. And it's just like there are these 2 families that are coming together because it does a couple of things. When you don't do it alone with your family, some of the things that may be difficult for you to learn in your house, you might see displayed in a healthier environment in somebody else's home, right? So if you're trying to get your children to do the dishes and they're not with it, but at another person's house, their children are elated to do it, that might be a really godly and wholesome way for your children to see, like, I probably need to do my work around the house. When we don't do it alone, we do it with relationship, it helps introduce your children to a tribe that they can be a part of. Wow. So it's one thing to know that it's just our 4 and no more. But when my parents introduced me, and in some cultures they say uncle here and uncle that, but like a Nana Leslie, who is now in Atlanta, and I say good evening to you, we love you, all the way in Georgia. But knowing if I can't find my people, my family, our family's tribe is wide. Like it takes a village to raise children. It takes a village for a husband to grow up. Wouldn't it be awesome if you had other guy friends that were married with children in the same age range, or wives in the same that have been the same marital timeline, where you can actually go and communicate with other people and literally build your tribe. So that's really important. And maybe at some point in time we can talk about how to find those people, because not every person that you see that is attractive should be actually attached to you and your people. Right? You need to be in alignment, because just because somebody looks good or their family, they have pieces that you want, sometimes that work is a little bit too much for you, and you don't want to make that decision and break relationship. Do you guys have anything on that with community relationship?
You know, Josh, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but one of the big things that's right now is the blended family.
Yep.
You're talking about bringing 2 different perspectives, sometimes 4 or 5 perspectives. It's a challenge for families in that category. So I'm sure we will talk more and more about that. But what about that as it relates to how the communication should work in those kinds of families?
Yeah, I don't know specifically, so I'm going to use the Word of God, right? So the Word of God says where 2 or 3 are gathered together, that Christ is there, like His presence is literally there. So I would make the suggestion based off of the Word of God, because I just want to make sure that this is not convicting, this is not condemning, right? So if you're in a family where you're trying to figure out how to bring both families together, there is sovereignty in knowing that they are children on both sides, but I think that there's an opportunity for there to be unity when everybody comes together, and I think it comes from the mother of one side and the father of the other saying, like, no, like, you're my son, you know what I'm saying? And doing those things, filling the gap, but not stepping over the boundaries that would make it difficult for the child to be able to glean and receive them, right? So let's talk about a number 6, right? So just really quick, just for the class. Number 1 was to practice forgiveness and reconciliation. Number 2 was to wrap each other up, to have that physical touch. Number 3 was to give your people crushable tasks, like make sure your expectations are reachable. Number 4 is to have open communication. Number 5 is not to do it alone. And number 6 is one thing that I think that Adam really should have done with Cain, was if he would have introduced Cain to the God that he knew, Cain would have been able to give the right offering the first time. we talk about this, like it's impossible for you to do family without Christ in the home. Like if you do not have a culture of prayer, if you don't have a culture of forgiveness, if you don't have a culture of worship, if you don't have a culture of devotion in your home, like it's impossible for us to be doing what we need to do as kingdom citizens in family if Christ is not apparent and if he's not there. So here are a couple of things that we should be doing, right? So the plans that God gave my parents for me, one way that they can introduce me to the God that they love is by telling me what God told them before I was here.
Yes.
That is like that is something that I think is so important. If Pastor Linnell is holding my little chubby face and she says, when God gave me you, he said that you were going to do this and you were going to do that, and that these were the dreams, and that you would be able to do anything that you put your mind to. So then you're able to then rear them and say, because God showed me this is the way that we have to live. But if you give your kids expectations without something to anchor it to, it's really tough. Like you're just telling me to go to church and you're telling me to tithe, but like I want to be able to know like what we're doing it for, right? The second thing is to teach us how to pray. I don't know how else to learn about God rather than talking to him. When you start to teach your children, we were taught that our relationship with God was a legitimate relationship. So my dad would ask, like, what are some of the things that you do with your friends to show them that you love them or to stay in contact? And I would say, like, all the mundane things, right? Like, I get on my bike and I ride over and I say hello. Like, I share my toys. I talk to them about those types of things. And I think that sometimes we neglect our relationship with God, and the only time that we go to him is when we need something. So if you're teaching your children in your prayer time, the only time that you go and pray to God is when you need something or for him to make a way, we can begin to create incongruencies with their relationships with Christ after they are with you. But every time that there's a win, even if it seems insignificant, you point back to God and like, look what God did for us. Like, look what God did for us here. Man, look what God did for us here. And you connect that with prayer, then it will become communication with your people. So really quick from the both of you, like, can you give one example in the home where you can begin to display your relationship as a parent with God to your children? How do you share your relationship? This is the God that we serve.
The one way I do it is modeling it myself, the disciplines of actually letting you see me pray, actually letting you see me read the Word of God, to also, like Josh, when you were saying, how do you affirm that in your kids? I think every birthday is an opportunity for parents to remind little Johnny or little Annie that, you know, I remember when I was carrying you, how the Lord spoke to me and he said that you would be this or that. So I think we have to actually be what we want to see in our children.
Yeah.
I would encourage people to go to Facebook, go to Ambassadors Worship Center or AWC, and go to that children's video that's not far on the feed.
That's good.
That children's video tells you, if your children can quote the scripture like a lot of those AWC kids did,
right,
you're practicing in the home. If they can worship like those AWC kids are doing, you're doing the right things in your home. If they know how to pray, you're doing the right things in your home. That's a great example for you to go to.
That's really good. That's really good. Yeah, and I think that then it becomes the point of it is to help your child make the decision for themselves to serve God in the home before they leave. Because that's a really tough trend, and we could talk about that later, because every family goes through a scenario or a season of insanity, right? So if I made my decision I'm going to serve God before I leave out of the house, it makes it easier to go through those seasons. So here we go. Number 7. So number 7 is creating a mistake handbook. Now, I don't want this to be scary. I don't want this to feel condemning. And I really don't want this to be something that like you have to relive your past. But this point is so important. This is the point that I'm trying to make in number 7, is that the mistakes that you have made as a parent, if you present them to us in a way that it teaches us, and you present them to us in a way that you learned your lesson and that you're better for it, and if that didn't happen, you wouldn't be the mom or the dad that we have, we're literally able to take your mistake and throw it in a book so that when we run into it, we can open up a book of where you made the mistake and apply how God helped you get through it. Yes. when you don't share, Adam, what happened to you in Eden with your son Cain when he is outside of Eden, it can be difficult for him to think like that you're an honorable person. It could sound like Cain looking at Adam like, you did this to us. But if Adam were to share with Cain, like, Cain, I'm so sorry. I made the wrong mistake. This is what happened. This is why we're here. But I'm going to teach you how to not make the same mistakes that Daddy made. That level of communication allows for your mistakes to be our playbook.
Wow.
Right?
So good.
So thank you. I hope this makes sense. So these are a couple of things that you can do. And this is a two-step process. Share what happened objectively, right? Like your children know that your breath used to smell a little bit like alcohol. Your kids know that you were robbing Peter to play Paul. Like we're not silly, but if you share with them up front, like don't share a whole bunch like that make them like damaged at 2 or 3 or 4, right? Like, but if you share with them what happened, that's number one. And then number 2, sharing what you learned. Because if you learn something, you learning something is closely connected to you getting over it. And how you hear, and when you've dealt with some of those things, and when my dad tells me like, hey, you're going to deal with these types of things as a young man, but I'm going to be here when it happens and just come to me when you see it. Now what happens is I'm not just left to myself to read this playbook. I'm able to come to him as the master teacher, right, in my life and as the man of God in my life. And I'm saying like, hey, remember in chapter 6, you said that I was going to deal with how my body feels here. Like it says this here, but what am I supposed to do? So then what he's dealt with, what he's beaten, what he's conquered, I'm able to glean from as a step-by-step ABCD 1, 2, 3 of how to get myself out of that situation. So parents, right now, I pray for all of you that God would release a blessing of boldness for a lot of the things that you think is too big for little Johnny or little Sally, that God would give you the boldness to be able to package it and give it to them, that it's a gift for their future rather than something that traumatizes them right now, right? So do you guys have anything on that one? Because I think that as a parent, you got to speak on that one.
You got to say something about
You gotta
that.
say
You
something.
got to say something about that.
They got to type in the chat. Like, you got to say something. You got something there.
I think parents who are not open that they made mistakes and it's okay if you make them, actually produce sort of pathetic children.
That's tough.
Okay. You end up, everyone needs to know the law in the land. You don't break the law breaks you. So everybody needs to know the laws. They need to know what's going to happen in the house.
That's good.
So when I make this mistake, I'm looking for this to happen.
Yeah.
This is what's coming. This is what it is. There's nothing more fearful than being in a position where you don't know what's going to happen as a child.
It's unpredictable. That's good.
You don't need to be if the parent is not leading that and it's an unpredictable house.
Yes.
It's a house where you end up in animalistic, basic, I'm trying primal living.
What?
Primal.
So explain that.
You're reduced to primal living. You're reduced to an animal. You're reduced to, I'm walking in the forest and I don't know at any minute something's going to reach out and bite me on the behind.
Fight or flight instincts.
Exactly. That's primal.
Fidgety.
If you're fight or flight, if you got a fight or flight child
This is so good.
in an unstable house, they will never play offense. Mm-hmm. They will be defense, offense. They'll play defense all the time because they feel like something's coming.
That's good.
They will never play offense,
That's really
defense. So they will get very few things done. They won't do good in school. They won't do good in relationships. And you'll be trying to get them tutors. They don't need a tutor. They just need someone to set the thermostat in the house.
Set the thermostat.
So they know what the temperature is going to be when they come. They need to know what mom's going to be like, what dad's going to be like. They need to know what's going to happen when I make a mistake.
That's really good. Because that primal part is so important. And you're not just going to act like that in the house. Yes. Every opportunity that comes to your child, they're going to, if it seems like it's too good to be true, it's not.
See, if your child knows, if I make a mistake doing what I believe is right, I know what my mom's going to do. She's going to say, that was a mistake, but I like the reason in which you did it.
That's so good.
I like the motive in which you did it. If the child knows that, they will leave your house every day willing to take risks.
Yes.
They will leave the house knowing if I see an opportunity
Right.
and I believe it's right and I go through my checkpoints, I should take the opportunity. Man, if it was a mistake, I know it's going to happen when I get home. Son, that was a mistake, but how did you get there? How did you feel about it? Why did you make that decision? Wow, that was the right motive.
Yes.
What would you do next
Yes,
time?
right.
So now you have
really
children
good.
who are willing to walk through their life instead of being afraid all the time. And some kids can be afraid
Of their parents.
of their parents, not the world, not friends, not teachers, not the police, not anybody.
Speak on that.
What stops them from exploring in life is when they're afraid of you.
Man. And there is such a freedom knowing that I was never afraid to make the mistakes. When you give your children the permission to mess up a lot,
I got stirred up on that one.
man, I think that's so good because it ties into the last one, which is really, I think it's going to save some people's lives and give you some foundation. But I know we got to talk about this because if you are skittish and scared, any good thing that comes to you, you won't take it. So that means that God will try to bless your children even after you're 6 feet under, and they won't even be able to trust God.
There is a reason the lion will go to sleep in the middle of the safari.
Okay?
There's a reason that the lion will lay out in the middle of Serengeti and go to sleep.
Right.
Because he's the biggest lion. He's the eater.
Yeah, you know, we're good.
He's the
Mess with
eater.
me.
But the antelope, that antelope,
That's so good.
that wildebeest,
Yeah.
is not going to sleep out there because it believes there's a lion somewhere prowling around. And you want to teach your children that they're lions.
Man, so good.
You want to teach them that they're lions, that when they go into the world, that they have permission from God and from their parents to take what they belong to them, what
Yes,
belongs
indeed.
to them.
That's so
to
good.
be not aggressive, but to be assertive, to open up their heart and mind to opportunities. And if a lion misses the antelope, he doesn't sit down when he goes home. He doesn't sit down and the daddy lion beats him up. It's like, great job, son. Try it again tomorrow.
And I expect for you to.
Exactly. The father, the mother, the aunt, the uncle, I grew up in the house of my sister. And my sister expected me to take opportunities that were in front of me. And when I made mistakes, she was like, okay, that was wrong to do. And she would say, I'm not a man, so I really don't know. But that was a mistake, obviously. So you need to go talk to someone. But great job.
Right.
That's all I needed.
Right. Do you have anything?
This just gives, as Pastor was going through all that, all I kept hearing is, you do that through communicating. You have to have open communication in the good times, the sad times, the bad times, the scared times. You've got to be able to communicate, and you learn all these things before all of the crises that will happen in life. And I want to say this to parents, especially young parents, and to all parents, and I had to learn this, especially coming from the Deep South. If you haven't trained your children, you do not have a right to discipline your children.
Wow.
Think about that. Selah. We need to do a better job at training, not just disciplining. And I remember with us, you would think, oh, they're just little textbook parents. But before we would discipline Joshua and Callie, we spent a lot of time communicating. Now, listen, you have done this, and this is why we're about to discipline you in the manner in which we are going to do so. And we would have talks about what was about to happen, why it was about to happen,
Trauma.
and what we would expect of them after we discipline them. That they would not be going in a corner, they would not be going upstairs away from us, but they would remain in the family environment.
Come watch
You're
this
gonna come
movie.
to dinner with a happy face on.
Right. Because I think that really helps you if the worst butt whippings that you get are at home. And this is what I mean, like figuratively. If I know that I am being broken down and put back together in the house, a bad boss will never faze me.
Right.
Somebody that's dealing with racism or sexism or all the different isms or socialism, like somebody calling me out my name won't make a rise out of me because, like, I have to deal with them when I go home. So I'm, like, bulletproof. You know what I'm saying? Not abusive, but I'm bulletproof.
If your children, if you or your sister,
That's really good, Mom.
if you and your sister would walk away from an opportunity that fits your gift. It was the timing of the Lord that brought it into your life. And you walked away from it because you were afraid, or someone said something to you, or you felt uncomfortable.
Yep.
We would say that's a mistake. You should not walk away from something because someone called you out of your name. You should not walk away from something because someone has set you up to fail.
Yes.
Or someone picked a fight with you, or someone bullied you, or
Yes.
whatever that is. We would not expect you to walk away from an open door because of something outside of you.
Something that's not even in your control.
Exactly.
really
It has
good.
nothing to do with it. When you came home, we'd be like, what happened? You did what? Why? Because it's like, what did he
you
have
kidding?
to do with any of this? This was God opening a door for you.
Exactly. And one thing that that Dad would say multiple times is he would say, is that the story you're going to go with? So whenever X, Y, and Z would happen, like you didn't go and get the scholarship turned in because of what? I didn't have gas in the car. So when you're standing in the pearly gates and God asks you, why didn't you get your degree? Your response is going to be, because you didn't have gas in your car. Really? That's what you want to stand on? It begins to undergird your children that regardless of what's standing in my way, I'm going to get over this obstacle.
Reasons are different from excuses.
That's really good. I should type that out. That's really good.
So if you give me a reason, and your mom sometimes, as tough as she would be in the house, she was expecting that she could be tough. But when I got tough, she's like, just, it's
calm
okay.
down.
Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute.
Why are you talking to me in this manner?
You can't talk to me or the kids like
you
this.
done?
But if you give me a reason, I'm like, okay, I think I get the reason. But if you give me an excuse, I come unglued. Because a reason is external,
That's good.
something out of your control. But an excuse is internal.
Yes.
Which means to me as a father, there's something going on inside you.
Yeah.
That I got to make sure is taken care of
Right.
before you have a little Joshua.
Right. Because then it'll be perpetual.
Yes.
That's so good. So I hope that this is good because I know that we have like a time limit of like how we try to keep these, but this I'm telling you, it's getting gooder and gooder.
wow.
So here we go.
Okay.
Last point is this: is to clean out your soft spots. So where we're from, we eat this thing called crab. You know what crab is? So Dungeness crab. So basically, it's the whole crab. You break it apart, you break the legs off, and you eat it, right? Another thing that we eat is soft shell. Another thing that we eat is crawfish. But there's this part of the crawfish that's called the dead man. So my dad, when he was teaching, if you ever want to see somebody love on somebody, teach them how to eat crawfish. Because you have to get close to the person. There's going to be like crab meat, juice all over you, and it's a great time. It's awesome. But the dead man is the gills of the crawfish. And sometimes, or the crab, right? Like, so if you break it open, it looks like feathers. And if you eat that, you can get really, really sick because that's the organ of the crawfish that they use to like breathe. So you only eat the good stuff and you throw away the trash. What is so important about this is that there are a lot of soft spots in our family that is the dead man. There's a lot of stuff in our lives that when we start to consume it as a family, it can make us sick. And this is why I think it's so important for us to share our family history. We know, because we're a family, and if you're in family, there's tough conversations and there's a lot of yucky stuff in your families that we don't want to deal with. But we know that if you share the information and if you share the history, I'll realize that me at 27, I'm going through the same phases that he did at 27, and my grandfather, and my great-grandfather. And if we stay in communication throughout the generations, my playbook gets really, really thick, and the areas in my life that I feel that are my personal sin, I realize it's our family's actual opportunity. Yes. It's not my personal sin. It's my family's opportunity. So it becomes this thing like I'm handing down this opportunity for you to become a champion and get your ring in the same fight that I had. That's why it was so important for Adam to talk to Cain about what was going on so that he would be able to share with him, you're going to go to the ground and it's not going to give you anything. But let me give you some tools of how to plant in this area. These are things like addiction. There are some things in your family that literally have run the course and run rampant in your family, and it's not your fault. Like, it's not your fault. It's because if we believe that schizophrenia or mental disabilities or mental caps can run through the family, then you can be predisposed to high blood pressure and things like that. You could be predisposed to the isms, alcoholism, or being addicted to certain things. But it's time for us as a family to begin to talk about it so that we can change our bad habits into something that our family knows. This is something that we struggle with, but with the grace of God, we are learning to overcome it, right? So there are different things that our families are susceptible to. Susceptible basically means that what one family won't struggle with, we have a really tough time dealing with. For one family, finances are really easy for them, but for us, we love to eat out. Yeah. For another family, spending time and going to the gym and eating correctly is super easy for them, but we really love our potlucks and we really love our chicken pot pies and things like that. When we begin to talk about our family history, we take away the strength and the power of the enemy to condemn us and make us feel some type of way, and we actually are able to use what is happening in our family as a strength. So I really hope that tonight has been a blessing to you. This sermon series has been so much fun to teach, but it's also been so much fun to be able to watch all of you literally taking the notes, gleaning from our time together, and then taking it home and practicing it with your people. This sermon series is something that we're hoping that when we start this new year, that when we get the word for the year next year, when we start our consecration and our fasting time, what would happen if we did the work now so that when we go before God broken, we're actually a family that's well put together? That's our hope, and that's our want for you. So right now where you are, even if you're by yourself, wrap your arms around yourself. If you're around your family, like huddle up, and we're going to pray for you tonight that everything that we talked about, that God will give you supernatural grace and mercy to actually make these things happen in your household. Are you ready? Come on, let's do it. Father God, we thank you so much for who you are. God, we also thank you that when you said in your word that if 2 or 3 are gathered together in the same space, your presence is there. So God, we're all here. We're all here on live. Some of us are watching this in post-production. Like we're watching this on YouTube a couple days later. Regardless of where we're watching, God, we just accept your presence in our lives. God, that you would literally live in the hallway of our room, of our houses, in every single room, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, in the bedroom, in the basement, in the garage, outside, in the yard, in our cars. God, that as we start to move forward, that we would start having open conversation, talking about our family history, setting realistic expectations, and trying to be better as a family unit. God, we ask that you would make all of these things happen, and that as we begin to run towards trying to win in family, and every single person that is watching says what? Amen. We are looking for you to win in your relationships. Don't forget, we have small groups that are coming up next year. Get your mind right. We have our fasting time that's coming. Get your mind right. Men, 8 o'clock this Saturday. Get your mind right. Drenched this Saturday. Get your mind right. Meet us here Sunday, 10 o'clock. Do not miss it. We can't wait to see you. We love you all. Be good.